Betsy tried to focus more on being a high school student, not the girlfriend of her algebra teacher. During the past year, she had only focused on her secret relationship with Ken, and her popularity and rank on the cheer team had fallen. She would soon start senior year and wanted to have a high school experience that she could look back on and be proud of. She owed it to herself. She must have been extremely out of practice and out of shape, because the vigorous movement caused her to feel sick to her stomach, and she rushed to the bathroom to vomit. She scrubbed the toilet and the floor clean after emptying the contents of her stomach. Even with her diabetes, she was never one to throw up. She could only remember a handful of times even in childhood. Did she have the flu, or could something else be wrong? Betsy stared at herself in the mirror and inspected her body. Her cheer uniform was beginning to feel snug. Could she be pregnant? Of course she couldn't. She was only 17 and had her whole life ahead of her. She needed to adjust her diet and get back into shape. That was all it was. She could not possibly be pregnant. Betsy thought about that during the night and into the morning. She looked back in her diary, because she would always write when she got her period. She realized that she hadn't gotten her period in 2 months. She figured that it was because of the stress of her relationship with Ken. She immediately bought a pregnancy test. She was terrified that her life was about to change forever. She couldn't have a baby right now. Her relationship with Ken was still a secret, and he was still married. Betsy saw the 2 pink lines and could not believe it. She was pregnant with her teacher's child. She was going to be a teen mom. She was not ready to be a mom. She began to weep. This was not how her life was supposed to go. She was supposed to graduate high school, and then she and Ken were going to get married. What was she going to do? A few weeks later, it was Betsy and Anna's junior prom. Betsy immediately told her best friend that she was pregnant. Anna freaked out and started crying for her friend. She told her she was not ready to be a mother, and Ken would not stay with her once he found out about the baby. Betsy tried to enjoy her night. This would be one of the last times that she would be able to enjoy her teenage years. She would soon have to grow up and take care of another person, and that scared her. She went into the bathroom and examined her growing belly. She was already in her 2nd trimester. She could only hide her pregnancy for so long. She tried to wear flowy dresses, but it was getting more difficult to hide her baby bump. She needed to tell Ken and her family soon. To Betsy's surprise, she was crowned prom queen by her peers. She walked up to the stage and accepted her crown. She wondered how differently her peers would think of her if they knew that she was pregnant with Mr. Dodson's baby. She certainly wouldn't be up there being crowned prom queen. She basked in this feeling because she would never feel this on top of the world again. After accepting her crown, she rushed to the bathroom to vomit. She could not hide her pregnancy much longer. Towards the end of the dance, Ken asked her to meet him outside of the gym so they could have their own special dance. They swayed together, and for the first time since she found out she was pregnant, she felt happy. She and Ken would get married and raise this child together. The start of their family was not how she had wanted it to go, but they would figure it out. She loved Ken and was carrying their future in her belly. To the Barton family's shock and surprise, and returned home one early morning. She was badly beaten and bruised, but she was there, and had been through so much over the 5 years since she left. At first, and felt safe with Freddie. He helped her heal from her trauma with her father coming back into her life. He consoled her for weeks and made her feel better about her decision to leave home. All she needed was Freddie. That bliss changed quickly. Freddie changed after the initial weeks of her being there. He began to yell at her for little things and was overly critical of her. Freddie always made up for the screaming with intimacy. He made her feel so good and so loved during these moments that it almost made her forget about his temper. He was so sweet to her in those moments and made her feel like the most special girl in the world. That feeling quickly changed when Freddie struck her for the first time because she forgot to take out the trash, and briefly thought about leaving after Freddie got physical with her, but ultimately decided that she couldn't. She had burnt bridges with her entire family and wouldn't welcome her back with open arms. She decided that the only way that this would work was if she became the perfect housewife and never forgot to do anything for Freddie again. Freddie was happy to see him become a better dutiful woman. He complimented her cooking. That changed quickly if one forgot to set the table or forgot to season the meal to Freddie's liking. He called her worthless and told her she was lucky he kept her around. Freddie always made his cruelty better by showering her with compliments and making love to her, and began to feel whiplash with how fast Freddie's emotions changed towards her. In the same night, Freddie could tell her that nobody loved her and later tell her that she was the most beautiful woman in the world and he was the luckiest man in the world. Anne was dissatisfied with her relationship with Freddie. It took her way too long to realize it, but her sister was right. Freddie was just like Bradley and she deserved better. She knew she would have to beg for her family's forgiveness, but she wanted to go home. Anne confronted Freddie and told him that the way he treated her wasn't acceptable. She informed him that she was leaving him. Freddie would not accept this, and stood her ground and told him she would be packing her bags to leave. She had been living in fear for 3.5 years and wouldn't love that way anymore. Freddie struck her and told her that if she ever tried to leave again, he would do more than strike her, and passed out because of the strength of the hit, and tried to come to terms with her new normal. There was never a week that she wasn't riddled with bruises. She couldn't recognize herself in the mirror anymore. She looked in the mirror and saw her mother, and that terrified her. She did not want the same fate her mother did. Shortly after the incident, Freddie decided that they would try for a baby. This was the last thing that Anne wanted, but she was not in a position to say no. She secretly started taking birth control and tried her best to make her life bearable. She read books that brought her joy and even went to the local library when Freddie was at work. She had glimmers of happiness in her life with Freddie, but she was deeply unhappy. She missed her family dearly and wanted to go back to them. She felt like Freddie's prisoner and did not know how to escape. She knew her treatment would only get worse the longer she stayed. She didn't even love him anymore. She honestly wished he was in the ground. She finally had enough and told him that if he wanted her to stay with him, he needed to treat her better. She told him that he would never lay a hand on her ever again, or she would leave. Freddie told her that she was merely a woman and therefore did not have choices. He would treat her the way he saw fit. She was a terrible housewife and partner, so that is why he strikes her, to keep her in line and remind her who is in charge. She could see Freddie's anger beginning to rise, so she begged him for forgiveness. She realized there was no reasoning with him, so she would have to leave in secret. Anne's apology was not good enough for Freddie. He struck her again and again. His hits were unrelenting and powerful, and thought that this was how her life would cease to exist. He had never been this cruel and dangerous before. That night, after Freddie had gone to bed and packed what little she had, she was leaving him with barely her life, and walked 4 miles in the rain to get to the train station. She stole just enough money from Freddie to make it home to Willow Creek. She couldn't wait to hug her family and be where she was loved once again. She needed to apologize to her sister. Charlene was taken aback by the state her eldest sister was in and began to weep for her. Anne hugged her baby sister and asked where Daphne was. Charlene shared the news of her passing and broke down in tears. She had wasted too much time with Freddie and would never get to apologize for the nasty things she said to Daphne. Anne hugged Matthew and expressed how sorry she was to hear about Daphne. Matthew tried to keep it together. He told her that this would always be her home and she could stay there as long as she needed. It was what Daphne would have wanted. Betsy was over the moon to see her big sister once again. She had missed her so much and felt so grateful to have her back during this crazy time in her life, and would catch up with her family the next day. For now, she needed to sleep soundly for the first time in 5 years. She was finally safe. And had only been back in the Barton home for 2 weeks when she missed her period. She bought a pregnancy test and took it one morning before anyone had gotten out of bed that day. She prayed that she was not pregnant. She could not have the baby of the man that tormented her for 5 years. She was devastated when she saw the results of the pregnancy test. She was pregnant with Freddie's baby. She could not keep this baby. She would relive all of her trauma every day she would look at that child. Betsy and Anne sat down to catch up on their lives for the first time in several years, and felt nauseous from her pregnancy, but forced it away to talk to her sister. Betsy unleashed the details of her relationship with her teacher. She had to hide her feelings from this fears, and was thankful she was finally able to tell someone that she knew wouldn't judge her. Betsy said that she wished their mom was there to tell her what to do and began to cry. Anne wholeheartedly agreed. She really wished her sister was there to tell her what the right thing was. She told Betsy of her unwanted pregnancy. Betsy was shocked. Betsy disclosed that she too was with child. She finally felt a sense of comfort in her situation, and was in a similar situation, that they would get through it together. They could raise their babies together. And told her that she was not keeping it, that she couldn't. She had an appointment to terminate. Betsy surprised herself when she asked if she could go with to terminate as well, and stated that her sister was too far along to do so. She was going to have her baby. Betsy began to weep. She thought she would be going through this with her sister, but she was once again alone and unsure what to do. A week later, Anne traveled out of Willow Creek for our operation. It broke her heart to do so, but it was what was best for her. She could not have Freddie's baby. The procedure was successful, however, and felt immense guilt after everything was said and done. It took her many weeks to feel okay with her decision. Betsy went to Ken's home one day after school and told him of their child. Ken was surprised and at first did not believe her. Betsy begged him to leave his wife and raise this baby with her. Ken began to yell at her, something he had never done before. He told her that she was a delusional child and he would not be leaving his wife. Betsy was confused and angry. She brought up the fact that he told her that this was their plan. She loved him and they were supposed to be together. Ken told her that he was using her to get his rocks off. He never loved her and never wanted a relationship with her. He wanted nothing to do with this baby. He already had a family of his own and did not want any other children, especially not with her. Betsy and Ken yelled back and forth at each other for a long time. The argument was not going anywhere. Betsy begged and pleaded for Ken to reconsider. He was the father and their baby needed him. She needed him. Ken was firm on his stance of cutting ties with Betsy and having her raise their child without him. Betsy did not even hear Mary come home, but when she sat down next to her, she told Ken's wife of their relationship and their baby. Mary began to yell at Betsy too. She called her a silly girl who knew nothing. Mary was aware of their physical connection, but that was all it would ever be. She and Ken were husband and wife, and Betsy would only be a passing fancy for her husband. Betsy was not the first and wouldn't be the last, but she was committed to her marriage and Ken would not leave her. She gave her enough money to terminate. Mary left the room and Betsy was left with Ken. She cried and begged him to reconsider. She was in love with him and knew that their love was real. Ken ignored her pleas and asked her to see herself out. Betsy walked home and could not believe what had just happened. She snuck into her home and cried in her bed for hours. She was going to have to raise this baby on her own. Since Betsy found out that she was pregnant, her grades slipped and she was officially failing high school. News of her pregnancy had circulated around the school, and she started senior year of high school with eating alone at lunch. Nobody wanted to be friends with the girl who was stupid enough to get pregnant in high school. She had never felt so alone. Betsy tried to concentrate in algebra, but it was extremely difficult to listen to the man whose baby she was carrying talk about equations without a care in the world. She was utterly devastated. Ken seemed to get enjoyment from picking on Betsy in class. They no longer had tutoring sessions, and he knew Betsy's grades were struggling. Still, he called on her often to embarrass her. She didn't understand how a man who was once so sweet and loving towards her could be so cruel, especially when she was carrying his baby. School became Betsy's personal hell. She did not want to be in school anymore and could not take the constant teasing and jokes made at her expense. She waited until all of the other kids left the room and sobbed. Life could not get any worse for her. That was until her best friend, Anna, went to the principal's office. She told the principal of she and Mr. Dodson's relationship. He was furious. Anna did so to save her friend's reputation and get Ken fired, but Betsy did not see it that way. The principal immediately called Betsy into his office. He was eerily quiet for a long time, silently judging Betsy's growing belly. The principal began to yell at her for seducing a teacher. He was very disappointed about her loose morals. Betsy tried to explain that Mr. Dodson paid her special attention for years and made her fall in love with him. She may have initiated the first kiss, but he initiated the whole relationship and physical aspect. On school property, the principal said that Betsy had options: to transfer to another school or to drop out of high school. Given her delicate condition, dropping out of high school would be the best to salvage what was left of her reputation. Betsy wept in the principal's office. She didn't want to drop out, but didn't feel like she had another option. She was ruined. Her life was ruined. Betsy dropped out of high school that day. Betsy raced outside to where Anna was and pushed her onto the concrete. She started hitting her and called her a terrible friend. Anna was the one who ruined her life. She would still at least have her diploma if it wasn't for her. The principal called Mr. Dodson to his office after Betsy left. The principal reprimanded him for seducing a student. He made the school look bad and went against the values of a teacher. Ken argued that Betsy was a liar. He never engaged in a relationship with her and only ever tutored her. Betsy became obsessed with him, and that is why he stopped their tutoring sessions. He said that Betsy got around in school, and that baby could be any boys in the senior class. The principal did not buy Ken's explanation and decided that it was best to terminate Ken's employment with the school. He held their teachers in high regard, and Ken did not uphold those values. Ken packed up his classroom. He was to leave the school with his things by the end of the day. Betsy entered Ken's classroom for the final time and apologized for Anna's actions. She never wanted him to get fired. Ken told her that she was the worst thing that ever happened to him, and he didn't want to ever see her again. That same day, Charlene felt particularly mischievous and wanted to snoop in Betsy's diary. She could not believe what she was reading. Her sister was pregnant with her teacher's baby. Matthew reprimanded his daughter for snooping in her sister's personal belongings. In an effort to alleviate her punishment, she told her father what the diary said. Matthew was absolutely beside himself by the revelation that his little girl was going to be a teen mom, and that she was taken advantage of by Mr. Dodson. He didn't know what he was going to do about this. He was not in a position to take care of a grandchild. Matthew sat Betsy down as soon as she returned home that night and asked if she had anything she would like to tell him. Betsy told him everything. the relationship with Ken, the pregnancy, and that she dropped out of high school. Matthew was devastated. He did not recognize the little girl that he erased from her first breath. She was a stranger to him now. Matthew could not deal with this right now. He told Betsy that she wasn't welcome in his home anymore. He coldly said now was the time to get to know her biological father and how disappointed her mom would be in her. She left the only home she had ever known, and the only person she could call was the father she never knew. Betsy took her father's advice and called Norman. They agreed to meet at one of the 2 diners in Willow Creek. Norman was nervous, but so excited to really have a chance to connect with his daughter for the first time. Betsy greeted her father with a hug. This was the first time she had been face to face with him since she was a toddler, and now that she got a good look at his face, the resemblance was uncanny. She was definitely Norman's daughter, and she was comforted by that. Betsy's plan had originally been to ask for help or a place to stay, but she pivoted completely because she wanted to get to know him. She asked him about his life and their family. He told her that she was named after his late sister who perished by drowning as a child. He told her that both of his parents had passed on, and he lived in his childhood home in Henford. He told her that he kept up with her life through pictures that her mother would send him each year. They ordered food and coincidentally ordered the same things with the same quirky addition. Betsy had always felt a disconnect with her dad because they were so different. She knew he loved her, but she had none of his quirks. She finally felt that sense of belonging with Norman. Finally, she told Norman of her situation. She told him that she had nowhere to go and only had the little money that Mary had given her to get rid of the baby. Norman was concerned for the safety of his daughter and was disappointed by his once best friend's decision to kick her out. He told his daughter that he would help her with everything she needed. She could live with him, but if she wanted to stay in Willow Creek, he would purchase her a small home to live in. He had been saving money every year to give to her when she turned 18. As much as Betsy wanted to get to know Norman better, she wanted to be close to her sisters. Norman understood but wanted to be in her life if she was open to that. Betsy would love that. Betsy said that the baby in her belly needed family, as she was doing this alone. She would be honored if Norman wanted to be this baby's official grandfather, and offered for Norman to feel her bum. As much as Norman hated to miss out on Betsy's life, he would not do so with his grandchild. He had waited for his chance to be there for Betsy her entire life. Norman called around that entire day and found a modest 1-bedroom home for Betsy. Betsy felt so grateful that Norman stepped up and became her father figure when he had been shunned to do so her auntie. Ray life. He saved her when the father that had raised her abandoned her in her time of need. After the furniture was delivered the next day, she prepared her first meal in her new home. The home felt strange and foreign, but that was mostly because she had never lived alone before. Cooking brought her some peace, and it made her feel closer to her mother, and had given her a few of her mother's recipes before she left, and she was thankful for that. For the first time in her life, she had a TV. Her parents refused to buy one for the home to encourage them to focus on their schoolwork. She kept up with the news, and the television brought some much-needed news to her otherwise silent home. There was a fire in Henford on Bagley which claimed her mother and uncle's childhood home. Her uncles had lost everything but survived the fire. She felt like her family could never catch a break. Betsy took many baths in her new home. She was in her 3rd trimester of pregnancy now, and her swollen body ached. She was huge for her gestational age. Norman gave her money to buy baby clothes for her little one. She washed all the tiny clothes so that they would be ready for her baby to wear once her baby arrived. She had to figure out how to use the washing machine. Her parents scrubbed their clothes outside, so this was brand new technology for her. She tried to sleep as much as she could now, because she knew that she would soon be up all night with a newborn. Her large belly made it difficult to get comfortable, and she tossed and turned most nights. Her dreams were her happy place because in them she was still with Ken. She wasn't about to be a teen mother, and she was still in high school. She wished her dreams were her reality, but she woke up every morning disappointed. She was grateful for Norman's generosity, but knew she had to find a job soon, so she started looking for ads for jobs in the local paper. Her options were limited because she was a high school dropout. Many of the available jobs she could not currently do because she was pregnant. She decided that her safest option was becoming a waitress at the local diner. This way, she could have flexible hours when the baby came and could also rely on tips.